Welcome to Success Skills at Home and at School for middle school and high school during AIS Week.
Hi, I'm Jo McKim. I'm one of the Deeper Learning Resource teachers, and there's my contact information there on the screen. I hope you'll email me or tag me in your tweets and let me know the great things you're doing in your schools.
Hi, I'm Irma Bektich. I'm another one of the Deeper Learning Resource teachers here at JCPS. You're welcome to email me or tag me on Twitter if you ever need any support or if you would like to share the amazing things that you are doing to support your students with the success skills. So today we're going to be focusing and examining several questions, including why success skills, how to build community, how to plan with success skills in mind, and where can I find resources and examples?
So let's start with our why. Quite some time ago, probably 5-6 years ago, maybe even longer than that, JCPS really did some outreach to the community and started asking our community members, business leaders, church leaders, family members, what is it you expect from your students when they leave Jefferson County Public Schools? What skills, what talents, what knowledge do you want them to have? And you would expect them to say that we want them to be prepared for college, prepared for a career. But what we really heard was that we want students who are creative thinkers, who are problem solvers, who have work ethic, who have empathy and compassion and kindness, who are able to communicate clearly and collaborate and work with others. These are not the things that we normally assess in school. We normally assess grades and academics and content knowledge. But what do all those grades and all of that seat time really tell us about who the student is and whether they're ready for life beyond JCPS? Not much. Also, none of the things that we traditionally were doing in schools really help kids prepare for that unknown future. We don't know what jobs are going to be available in 5 years, let alone in 10 or 20 years when our kindergartners get out into the workforce and into the community. So after all of those community forums, JCPS developed what we call the capacities and dispositions for deeper learning. And in this diagram, you'll see that the student is at the center, becoming me, because that's what our students are doing in their time in Jefferson County Public Schools. They're becoming their own individual human beings. And what we can do to help them grow is to help them with their caring. How do they relate to others? How do they show that empathy and compassion? How do they collaborate with others? How do they grow in their communication skills and interpret what they hear and what they see? And how do they express and advocate and influence others? And always important in academics is how are they thinking? How are they thinking about the academics, but also how are they thinking critically and creatively and productively to be a part of our community? Ultimately, that evolved even further to create the JCPS Vision 2020 document, which really made our #1 goal in Jefferson County to be deeper learning. Deeper learning means that every student will progress towards both mastery of academic standards and those capacities and dispositions that our community said was important. That evolved even further with our 6 essential systems for a strong learning climate, which would make sure that our instructional planning and our practices are grounded in deeper learning and personalized learning. This is the foundation for much of the work we do now in Jefferson County. But that's not enough. We distilled that even further into our 3 pillars that are our touchstone for JCPS. The backpack of success skills, racial equity, and climate and culture. Underneath all of these 3 pillars, deeper learning and personalized learning are what brings it to life for our students in their classrooms. So when we look at how do we get to our backpack of success skills, it started with a group of schools within the district who are working with Ed Leader 21 and Envision Learning to create a graduate profile for their schools. These are elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, deciding how do we define what a student is when they leave our school? Are they creative thinkers? Are they problem solvers? Are they communicators? Are they collaborators? Are they strong and empathetic leaders? And as those schools began to do that work, we discovered that there was really a lot of overlap. And thus the JCPS Backpack of Success Skills was born. I like to just call them success skills because they're things that will help our students throughout life, not just things they need here in Jefferson County and not just things to keep in a backpack. They're the skills that are going to be shared and help them with everyone and everything that they do in life. On this slide, you'll see a link here at the bottom where you can go to the JCPS page that will give you all kinds of information about our backpack skills. Additionally, students are asked in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade to defend their learning and demonstrate that they have reached certain levels of mastery with these 5 success skills. JCPS has developed these documents. The one on the left here is for 8th grade, and the one on the right is for 12th grade. That really identifies what does it look like for these students to demonstrate these success skills. On both of these are links, so you can click on those and you can get those documents. It'll ask you to make a copy, and then you'll have it for your own use and planning. On the left, it actually gives the descriptors for the backpack of success skills. If you've been in JCPS for the last couple of years, you would have seen that in the new normal, and you would have probably seen those descriptors there on the left. On the right are the performance outcomes. Those are the sentence stems, the descriptions, if you will, that really need to guide our planning in creating lessons and units and performance-based assessments and learning experiences and environments to help students grow in each of these success skills. It's not enough for us to identify that kids are collaborating because they're talking to each other. We have to, as teachers, figure out how in our day-to-day work we are growing them as collaborators. How are they getting better? How are they improving? How are they reflecting on their skills and setting their own goals for growth? Ultimately, to reach the success level that we want our students to have with our success skills, both our teachers and our students need to think differently about school. We need to learn differently. We need to teach differently in order for us to create greatness for our students as they move beyond. One way that we can help our students to grow their success skills is by building a strong classroom community. As we move into NTI, starting the school year with NTI, it's going to be harder than ever for us to build community and relationships with our students, but it's the only way we're going to be able to help them grow their success skills. So we need to think about how we do that and how we're going to do that. And later on in this presentation, we're going to give you some resources and some tips and some tools to help you build a virtual community classroom and help students build relationships with each other and with you. But first, let's talk a little bit about how you plan instruction with the success skills in mind.
So when you are considering the success skills and planning instruction, they're not just a component of planning instructions, they're actually integral to your instruction. When you are planning instruction that is learner-centered, by considering the success skills and how students might develop those and reflect on those, you're truly putting the learner at the center of all of the activities and lesson planning that you are doing. JCPS has several different planning guides and templates that you could use to do this. One of them is the 4Ps planning template, which includes learners initiating purpose, learners driving the process, and learners creating products. But we call it the 4Ps template because the 4th P is the person. So the learner is at the center of everything. You might be wondering, where do the success skills come in? Well, they are weaved in throughout the entire process. But where you would kind of begin looking at them is when you're looking at your standards and the purpose component of your planning process. So you might consider how students are going to be developing each success skills or particular success skills, what opportunities they will have to reflect on those throughout the process, and not just as a matter of have I met the success skills. That's not what we're focusing on. We're focusing on how they have grown. And so what questions might you ask the learners that would prompt that reflection throughout the process, or even after they may have created a product? And what questions might learners ask themselves to reflect on those success skills? So this is a very effective tool, whether you are planning PBL or performance assessment. It truly helps you create amazing learning experiences with the learner at the center.
All right, next let's look at some examples of things that you can do in your classroom or with students to demonstrate their success skills at home or at work, as well as some resources you can use in the future. Let's start with something called the learner profile. The learner profile is a key component of personalized learning, and it can do two things. It helps you learn about your students so you can design instruction for them, but it also can help you, depending on what you do with it, build community and relationships among your class and your students. The learner profile is basically a warehouse. It's a place to store information about students. It includes their demographics, and all the information about them and where they live and who they are, but it also includes their interests, their likes, their dislikes, what makes them happy, what motivates them. It includes all that academic information of what are their grades in the past, what are their NAP scores, their SAT scores, their ACT scores, their CTE certifications that they may have received or are working on, all of that academic work. But it's also going to include information, perhaps some quizzes and opportunities for them to learn about who they are as learners. What are their learning styles? What are their leadership traits? Those kinds of things. So that's what it is. Why we use it. We use it to design instruction, to design for the learner, and use it to have conversations with the learner about their learning and how they're learning and how they're going to do better in the future. The first link here, the second bullet under what and why, is a link to a resource that further explains what it is and gives you a breakdown of all of those categories that should be in a learner profile. How can you use it? You can use it to personalize instruction, to design project-based learning, or even whole class learning or differentiated learning, where you're designing for the students' interests and their learning styles. You could also use it to differentiate based on those academic criteria if you needed to. But the point here is that it's a living, dynamic document that students are constantly updated, because we know their likes and dislikes and also their learning styles and leadership styles change almost monthly, just like their favorite songs and artists do. They need to be updating it, and we need to be using it and looking at it. And during NTI, that might mean we're having conversations with them during those synchronous times when we're meeting with them to talk about instruction and learning. The last link here under example is an example of a learning profile created by a middle school teacher in JCPS that has all of those components. She created it in Google Slides, but it doesn't have to be in Google Slides. It could be a doc. It could be a website. I've seen some high school teachers who had their students create a learner profile that was a website for that student, and they added blogs and they added vlogs and they added all kinds of things to their website over the course of the year, and the teacher periodically checked those or allowed them to share with the whole class what they were putting on their website. So it can look like a lot of things, but there's an example to get you started that's from right here in JCPS.
Okay, so when we are considering the success skills, we want to look at opportunities for students to develop those, whether they're at home or at work. And so if we look at the emerging innovator success skill, helping at home or at work might include questions such as, when have you asked questions about something you're interested in? When have you asked questions to extend and clarify your thinking? When have you designed a solution to a problem and tried it? Now, these solutions might be around challenging problems that students might have at home or in their community. Students might be creating or designing something to assist their family, but really they would be considering many of these questions or all of them at once. The really important piece to it is opportunities for students to document and reflect on how they are moving towards improving and developing their emerging innovator success skill. So they might consider, how can you share your learning? They might reflect on their solution, what worked and what didn't. They would consider what else they want to learn. So for example, if students were making a recipe with their family and creating something new that they've never made before, they might consider how they might make that different the next time or improve it. And these are some resources that you can use to learn more. The first one is 10 Ways to Teach Innovation. This one is really, really good. It's about teaching students to ask their own questions. So that is a huge component of students developing as emerging innovators, because we want our students to go through the process of knowledge building. And so as knowledge builders, they would really look at what questions they're able to ask and how they might build upon those questions as they consider a solution to a problem. And this last resource is an introduction to design thinking, which is super important whether students might be participating in a project-based learning opportunity from home, or really any type of challenge that they might be encountering that requires them to constantly revise their work or their ideas and questions. And here we have an excellent example of developing the Emerging Innovator Success Skill at Western Middle School. So this is an outstanding student example that you can watch from right here in JCPS.
All right, our next success skill is globally and culturally competent citizen. As I have sat in on defenses throughout the district in the last couple of years, this seems to be an area where students struggle. They often think that if they've studied another culture or learned a language, that in and of itself makes them globally and culturally competent, without realizing their role in being part of a community, and how to be a part of it. Be a citizen, you have to be part of a community, or citizen of a community. So they need to really think about how they're growing in that aspect of action orientation rather than just passively receiving information. During NTI, we need to be thinking about how our students can be growing as globally and culturally competent citizens at home and even at work. Ways they could be doing that could be through cooking, gardening, home repair, as they're learning things they've never learned before that maybe someone else has always done, but now in this new environment that we find ourselves in, they're having to pick up some different traits. They could be learning art or music that maybe they've never learned before, that has been passed down through their family. A lot of our high school students may be learning a lot about budgeting right now and economy, and what the economy is like in Louisville particularly, because some of our high school students are the only wage earners right now in their homes, as their parents have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. So as a result, they're learning about things like food deserts and religion and family and culture that they may have never done before. Some of our high school students are also participants in internships, and those may still be continuing even though we're all working from home. They may be working in a law office or at a bank or even at Humana in a work from home situation. We don't know what their experiences are unless we ask them, and then we need to help them see how those experiences are helping them become a globally and culturally competent citizen. One way we can do that is by asking them to document and share their experiences. What skills are part of their culture that they didn't know before, that they're learning now, and that they may actually use in the future? How are they improving their skills at budgeting or at music or art? How are they improving their skills at being a citizen? Maybe they participated in voter registration drive in the summer. Maybe they participated in some of the social justice actions that have been happening this summer. What did they learn from that, and how are they getting to be a part and be a citizen of Louisville by their participation there? what else could they learn from their family and their community, and how can they continue to be a part of a community? How are they defining what a community is? Those are all things that we can talk about with students that brings their work and their home into our discussions during NTI. Again, we've provided you with some links here to some resources that may help you in working with students, and an example of a high school student talking about what artifacts she's putting into her backpack to represent her as a globally and competent student, and how she has evolved as a globally and culturally competent student as a result of the work she is doing in her school.
Another success skill that is super important at home and at work is being a productive collaborator. So at home or at work, we might consider things like meal preparation, home projects, opportunities for students to help a sibling, assisting peers during NTI, or participating in team meetings. Just because we're not in a physical school building doesn't mean that students won't have opportunities to collaborate. So for example, students might be working on a project-based learning experience together and finding the best way to present their work. And that might require them to collaborate and brainstorm, whether they are brainstorming together on a Jamboard and then discussing their ideas and synthesizing together. They're going to really still be developing those super important productive collaborator capacities and skills. But if they're in the workplace, they might be participating in a team meeting where they're figuring out how to implement a new strategy or new information. Whatever that might be, students are still going to be developing as collaborators. And as they do that, it is important for them to document and reflect their growth. So they might consider, how did we collaborate? How did I help? So they're looking at what role they played in the collaboration. They might consider what was challenging, whether it was a challenge for them individually or as a whole team. They would look at, what could I do better? And so that last question is super critical for our students, because we want them to continue to reflect as productive collaborators and look at their growth over time and not just in particular instances. And next, we're going to show you some resources that might be helpful to you. The first one is the Marshmallow Challenge. What that is about is looking at students collaborating to build the tallest freestanding structure they can out of marshmallows and spaghetti. And although it gets kind of messy, probably the best part of implementing this, in my classroom at least, was that reflection that happened before we tried it again, where students looked at areas where they might improve in their communication and areas in which they were very successful. And so they were able to build upon that and use their strengths as productive collaborators. You might consider the cup stacking challenge or the 20 easy ways to collaborate virtually, because once again, we want to continue to build those skills even in an NTI setting. This is just another new opportunity to do this in a way that might look a little bit different for us and our students. And here we have an amazing video by John Spencer, which is about the 7 keys to creative collaboration.
All right, prepared and resilient learner is a success skill that most of us think about all the time. And often we think about it only in terms of student achievement. How are students doing on standardized assessments such as MAP, such as ACT, such as their CTE certifications? Or sometimes we may look at it in terms of our own assessments or our common formative assessments. The prepared and resilient learner is more than just a score. It's about students being able to ask their own questions, to be curious and look for information on their own. They want to learn, they want to research, and they want to share their learning. So when I talked earlier about personalized learning and that learner profile, this is where that really comes into play, is how do we help students show that they are prepared and resilient learners by demonstrating that they're curious and that they're able to go and learn on their own and identify how they learn and how they learn best and share that with others. So really we're talking about students being self-motivated and being metacognitive about their own thinking. We need students to start thinking about not only what they learned, but what they learned about themselves. What did they learn about how they learn and how they feel when they're learning? We also need students to think about times that they are not successful. Let's say they didn't get the score they wanted on an assessment. Well, that should not be the end of it. Instead, we should be talking about what comes next. Why did that not work for you? How could you learn this differently so you can get it right the next time, right? How do you show that resilience and persevere to do better? The other part of that, the other side of that coin, is students who are super successful on our assessments need to also be reflective. What did they do well? Why were they successful? Was it just super easy and something they already knew? Or was there something about the way they studied, the way they learned, the way they practiced, accessed, engaged with information that helped them learn the material that they may not have learned otherwise, so that they can replicate those scenarios in a different learning situation? So we really need to be asking students to be reflective and think about their thinking and think about their learning so that they can persevere and be prepared throughout their learning environment. Again, we've provided you with some links and some tools here, some tools for student goal setting. It's important for students to set their own goals for learning as well as for it to be set for them. Oftentimes, we see a lot of collaborative goal setting around MAP scores or around ACT or other standardized goal testing. But what does that mean to a student? I'm going to raise my score from a 200 to a 230, or I'm going to raise my ACT score from a 21 to a 24. What does that really mean to a student? A better goal setting mechanism would be for our students to talk about what skill is it that they need to learn. One of my favorite examples is an 8th grade student I heard in a defense who had a phenomenal MAP score in reading. It was way off the charts, post-high school level, very, very successful in reading. However, she said, the one thing this tells me is that I didn't do as well as I could have in reading poetry. I need to be better at reading poetry. So what she said for herself in her defense, her goal for the summer was to read more poetry. Even though she didn't love poetry, she saw that as her area of growth. And so that was her goal, to read more poetry and be better at interpreting and analyzing poetry. Those are the kinds of goals we need students to set, not just an arbitrary number on an assessment that really doesn't mean anything for them. We also have a link here about using gallery walks. We can do gallery walks virtually as well as in person. It just looks a little bit differently in Google Meets or in Zoom. So don't think that strategies that we use in person can't be modified or adapted for our virtual world. And here, this video that is linked into this slide is a group of students from the Academy at Shawnee and their AIC, Noah Klein, showing how they are setting goals and persevering as prepared and resilient learners.
And finally, we have the effective communicator success skill, which is extremely important whether our students are learning at home or at work. One way for students to practice this from home is by tutoring. So students might be tutoring a younger sibling or a classmate. If they're tutoring a younger sibling, they might consider their audience really, and how might they modify their communication to meet the needs of that younger sibling. If they are working with a classmate, they might consider the best mode for communication. Are they messaging? Are they talking? And are they asking prompting questions to them as they work through potentially a challenging problem or a PBL component, whatever that might be? Students will participate in meetings. That might look like a work meeting where they might be presenting something or asking really good questions. It might look like a meeting with their family where they are potentially resolving an issue or talking about their progress in NTI or whatever that might be. And then they would be advocating for change potentially. In our current context, many of our students are seeing the opportunity to become advocates, whether that's related to the COVID-19 response or things like racial injustice. Our students are feeling very empowered to make an impact in those areas. And so that growth in the way that they communicate is super important. And another way that they might practice is virtual exhibitions. As Joe said earlier, things like gallery walks and those amazing opportunities for students to share their learning and grow don't need to be stopped in the virtual setting. They just need to be kind of modified. And so in a virtual exhibition, students might consider how they're presenting their work. Are they doing a slideshow with a peer and writing out presentation notes? Are they practicing their communication differently in the virtual setting? What does that look like? What types of questions might their audience ask them in the exhibition? And how do they plan to communicate their answers? Who will answer particular questions? So all of these are various ways for students to practice their communication, whether they're at home or at work. And the really important component of this is students documenting, sharing, and reflecting as effective communicators. So they might consider, how did you demonstrate effective communication? What could you have done better? So not only would they be looking at the things that were successful for them, they would be looking at areas for improvement and growth. They would also consider at the very end of it what they still need to work on specifically. And then as they continue to practice their communication skills, they would go back and continue to reflect as well and have some way to document that and share it. And these are some resources, once again, that you can utilize to help students document and reflect and continue to grow as effective communicators. Those might include agree or disagree statements, various communication games, and there's also a resource on helping students give feedback. We want our students to be able to provide feedback to one another and really aid in that growth area, but we want them to do that in a way that is very positive. So you might establish some protocols. For example, one that we use often in math is I like and I wonder. Sentence starters for feedback and communication to get our students into the habit of providing positive feedback for others and then also reflecting positively for themselves. And we have an image here for you that says excellent communicators are not born, they are made. And so this really speaks to the idea that it's not just about where you start or where you end, whether you're looking at being an effective communicator or any of our other success skills. It's really about that process of how you're getting there and the ways in which you're reflecting and growing as a learner, as a person.
All right, we wanted to make sure that you had plenty of resources at your fingertips to get started with this work, especially as we are starting virtually. We know that's a challenge because we want to build those communities, build those relationships, design learner-centered experiences that will move our students forward academically as well as with their success skills. So just to highlight a few things here, Irma and I wanted to bring to your attention. First, I wanted to point out that there are two bullets here around PBL, and they're both about PBL and remote learning. And notice the second one is remote learning accessible for all students. So we really are talking about how can we continue to do project-based learning even though we don't have the students in front of us. What kinds of experiences can we design for them to do on their own, independently, perhaps at their own pace, to access information, to engage with information, and to create some product? And that's certainly something that can still happen virtually. In the spring, we did several PDs on the Digital Learning Channel around designing project-based learning during NTI, both specifically for content as well as interdisciplinary projects and completely student-driven projects like passion projects or genius hours. So there's a lot of resources out there around PBL and how you can do that during your virtual time with students. Irma, would you like to mention any of these?
Of course. So some of the resources that might be particularly helpful with NTI, especially here at the beginning, are ways to build a classroom community. And one of the reasons why that's so critical is because we know that in our classroom, relationships truly matter. Whether it's relationships between the teacher and the student, or the relationships among students, that relationship building piece has to be thought out, and it has to be at the center of our planning for NTI. And so those are just some really good virtual ways to build a classroom community. And another really helpful resource is the 10 Jamboard templates for distance learning. Jamboard is a really cool tool where students can brainstorm ideas. They might be in a breakout room where they have a particular question, and maybe in their breakout room, they use their sticky notes to kind of document and write out what they're thinking, and then they might discuss their ideas, synthesize them. They might move the sticky notes around a bit to kind of show how ideas are related. Really, there are so many different opportunities for learning and to prompt discussion and feedback between students. And so that's a really good tool for us to use during NTI.
All right, so as you can see, there's tons of resources linked into this slide deck for you. We hope you find something that is of value and that will help you in preparing. But most importantly, we hope that you'll reach out to us and let us support your work with students, whether that's virtually or when we get back in person, and hopefully one day we will. We want to be there for you. We can help you plan, we can help you design, we can help you build community in your virtual classrooms. Whatever your deeper learning needs are, we're here for you. Again, I'm Jo McKim.
I'm Irma Bektich.
And thanks for joining us.